now's the time.
Okay. The reason I wanted to talk about it is because I looked at the, let me just go to it. I looked at the distribution of the below market rate units, and it appeared that they are somewhat clumped. If you look on Exhibit B, as in boy, there's a site plan of the project and designation of affordable units, including floor plans. And it appears that the below market rate units tend to be more likely on the second floor, and there are quite a number that are right next to each other. And so I'm wondering how that's justified.
Pat, you're coming up to talk about that.
So there, I don't know if this is working or not, this cordless mic. It is. Doesn't sound like it is, but I'll take your word for it. So there are two places within the affordable agreement that I'm going to refer you to that helps to answer this question. So one is the exhibit that towards the back that Councilmember Fricke made reference to. And you'll see within there are a set of maps. So starting with the ground floor of the project, this is 65th Street, this is Hollis Street, this is the podium part of the project. And this is the townhouse part of the project. You'll see in this particular plan that the ground floor has a couple of units on Hollis Street and then 4 units that are on the townhouse side, but it's actually part of the podium project. So that's the first floor of a 4-story structure. And then you'll see in this map, and this is backwards for some reason, there's the second floor on this side of the page and the third floor on this side of the page. And you'll see there's a clustering of units of below market rate units on the second floor, and then there's a scattering of units on the third floor. So first, second, third floors. We did not ask for any units on the 4th floor of the podium because those are going to have some limited views, will have a premium. And as I've mentioned to you before, this BMR requirement costs the developer about $200,000 a unit in lost sales proceeds. And I neglected to say on this ground floor plan, in addition to the units that we have in the podium, we also have some townhouse below market rate units.
Can I just ask?
So there's
How many townhouse BMRs do we have?
there's 4 there.
4, okay.
So there's a negotiation.
Can I ask, the townhouses, are they bigger than the ones that are on the second floor?
Let's see.
The document that you're looking at now, I had a hard time deciphering. my
Well,
copy.
I wanted to kind of, if I could, I'll try and bring me back to that if I'm not addressing in this next table.
Okay.
So there's some recognition that when we negotiate these agreements that there's a cost to the developer. We don't try and get a perfectly even geographic distribution through the project. We try and get as best we can, but we often leave the top floor, the premium units, for example, out of the negotiation, recognizing that it's those premium areas where they are able to make up some of the lost revenues from the below market rate unit. Now, what I think is, this is in a different part of your agreement, is Exhibit H, and it's impossible to read on here. But this table, if you look at it, in addition to trying to get a geographic distribution of units, we also in this project tried to get a distribution of units by bedroom size and by square footage. So we purposely, and this project has a lot of different types of units, so we purposely attempted to get as broad a number of types of units as we could and not end up with just a few, a limited number of different types. So I think in this table, you'll see the reference made to podium, podium, podium. On the bottom of the table, you'll see on-grade townhouses. Those are 2-bedroom, 2.5 of 1,233 square feet. And then on the next table, you'll see on-grade townhouses for the next 3 here. And those range, again, all of those are 2 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, ranging from 1,032 square feet up to 1,295 square feet. So there is some geographic concentration, but in exchange for that, we also got some variety in the unit types. So that's how we ended up where we are.
Is it possible to have more of the townhouses be below market rates? Because it seemed like it was conspicuous that there were only 4 in a field of many, and there were many below market rate units on the second floor and a high concentration. So is it possible to move them to townhouses if the townhouses are not necessarily bigger than the ones on the second floor?
Well, we can try. This was the result of several months of negotiations. So if you want to send us back to the drawing board, then I would recommend that you hold this over and we'll see what we can do.
That would be my desire, members, council members, colleagues. That's my motion.
So just so I understand the motion, it's to substitute townhouses for the podium units.
Well, I don't need necessarily to dictate that level of detail, but what my observation was that there is the percentage of below market rate units among the townhouses was conspicuously low, and the concentration on the second floor was high, and that and I realized the argument that concentration is high so that there are different types of units, but I would like both.
So are you suggesting the agency underwrite the cost to do more townhouses?
No, I'm not. I'm suggesting that the number of the below market rate units on the second floor where I highlighted the concentration, I think the concentration, well, it's not simply me that says I think that the concentration is a bad idea. I think that when we've discussed affordable housing, we have highlighted the fact that that's something to avoid. And here we have a concentration that I thought we were trying to avoid. And when you compare it to the concentration among the townhouses, I think there's an opportunity to move some of the below market rate units, move some of the designations to some of the townhouses.
Okay, so how do you deal with the price tag attached to doing that? I just want to understand what you're proposing.
I would like the agreement to, I don't know necessarily whether there is a cost associated with that change, because it takes away designation from the second floor and puts the designation on townhouses. Is it the case that the townhouses are more expensive? That it is, okay. So,
Could you say that out loud in case people are at
Yeah,
home?
yes, they will
Okay.
sell for more.
the,
Excuse me, just a quick second. Could you have a number on that, or just that it's more?
No, I'm sorry, I
Okay,
don't.
thanks. No, that's okay, Pat. Sorry,
the
Joe.
requirement is 20%. And if you have a project in which they were all townhouses, then 20% of those townhouses would be below market rate. And as far as I'm aware, the redevelopment agency would not be subsidizing what is required, the 20%. Here we have a project that has both townhouses, which I can understand are more desirable, with this podium apartments, and it appears that they are, I don't want to sound pejorative, but they're kind of foisting the below market, the 20% requirement onto the.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Can I make a suggestion here? I would say this is really a question of policy. I mean, if we're going to have a policy that they're evenly distributed, then they should be evenly distributed. If they're not, if we're not going to have that policy, then we should change it so that they're only on the lower floors. But I don't know if it would be appropriate to make an adjustment for this particular project. But what he's saying is right. If you're going to have them evenly distributed, then there should be some on the top floor, bottom floor, and all the other floors. So we should decide what our policy is going to be and then adhere to it.
Mary, can I have a question for Patrick? Patrick, you're a professional in this arena, and you've certainly handled many of these negotiations. In your judgment, do you feel, given the overall project, that these units are evenly distributed?
I feel that they're evenly distributed, and I feel that there are some benefits that we're obtaining from this project that I was keeping in mind as we went through the negotiations that don't have directly to do with this agreement tonight, but they are building the entire greenway at no cost to the city, and they are, you will at a subsequent meeting be looking at an agreement for the purchase of parking spaces on the ground floor of the podium, and they're assuming all of the construction overrun cost risk on that project. So I felt like overall that what we negotiated here is beneficial to the city.
Well, the other thing is, if this were just cookie cutter units, that they were all exactly the same, you know, you'd look at this plan and you'd say, well, no, that's not evenly distributed. But what we're looking at is different sizes of units, different configurations of units, you know, it's kind of like a real balancing act to move forward to get this to happen. I think you've done a pretty superb job here in negotiating this, and I think if you look at not just the location, but also the sizes of the units, the configuration of the units, the prices, et cetera, we've done a good job of even distribution. And I would suggest a substitute motion that we approve this resolution.
But I just asked the question, though, in a situation where you have the more expensive units on the top floor or whatever, he said that he wanted to allow the developer to make up that money for the other below market rate units. So does that mean in every other circumstance where we have the expensive units on the top, that none of those will be below market rate units? It's a question of policy. It's not a question of one project or another.
I think that it's okay if you have. I think that it's okay if the top units, there are no below market rates, because multiple floors you can distribute 20% evenly without the top floor. But the problem is that if you separated out the two and you just applied 20% to the podium part of it, not the townhouses, then there would not be a concentration. It wouldn't be so conspicuous. It's because of this shifting, and it's the shifting that I'm objecting to. And Mayor Atkin, you said, well, should the agency contribute money to this, maybe that's what we should do. But this is obviously not what we said when we said not to concentrate below market rate units. This is a concentration. If you look on these floors, I mean, they're all below market rate practically. I mean, there's 6 out of 8 on one floor. So there is no way to say that that's not concentration.
And of the 8 units, are they all identically the same?
No, you need to refer that to
Of
that
course
table
not.
that I had up there. They're all
Of course
different.
not.
Well, here's what I would throw into the mix. There's always, in negotiations, there's give-backs and takes, and I hear what Pat's saying is that, given that in the development that Pulte did at Powell Street, they paid for half of the greenway, and in this section of the greenway, they're paying for the entire greenway. And I think that that's a big concession and helps the city. But I think there's some merit to what John is saying I think there's a logic in terms of size to the concentration. I don't like so many being on one floor. But what I do like is John's idea of trying to get more townhouse below market rate units, because it just feels to me like we've got a better chance of getting to some of our lower income residents that have families that way. So the trade-off I would be willing to offer is that if, and again, going on the assumption that our staff has negotiated a good deal, for a fair deal for both sides, and now we're trying to change the deal, what I would say, I would be willing to drop below the 20%, either do one of two things. Either we pay the difference to pick up more of the townhouses as the redevelopment agency, or we cut the percentage of below market rate units that are required in the project in exchange for getting more townhouses. And I think that gives us a better chance to draw families and get kids into the schools, which is also a big goal. So I'd like us to go back and take another crack at the negotiation, but I'm sort of approaching this like I did the Oak Walk project, is I'd like to see it sort of cost neutral to the developer from where we are right now at this point. Saying that we've got a good deal, and within the confines of that deal, let's try to move things around and have everybody come out whole and end up with more townhouses. And however we can do that, I'd be willing to take a look at it.
I will be the third voice of the agency to say that I'd like to see some more townhouses also, if there's a way that we can figure this out. I would prefer going with fewer, lower than 20%, rather than the agency pitching in more money at this stage.
And I would say, I would try and stick with the 20. That's the law. I mean,
That's right.
it's.
Well, it's our guideline. It's not.
I realize.
Right.
When I say it's the law,
Oh, right.
it's
Our
not
policy.
Right.
the
Not-
federal law. It's not
Right.
the state law. But
Right.
the city council passed this, and there is a downside to lowering the threshold for a particular case. I don't. There's
I just
obviously no
think
precedent, but I just think if it's 20, if you're going to talk the talk on the 20%, you need to walk the walk. And I hear what Pat's saying, that we got these other things, but a little bit apples and oranges. We should not be watering down the 20% because they paid for the entire greenway instead of half the greenway, and because they're going to incur any risk on the parking. So those are different things.
Well, but it's saving the redevelopment agency money in another area instead of
That's
us
right.
paying for half of the greenway. I mean, that money, then can be
I-
used in other ways.
I
So
understand that money is fungible, but I
Right.
just but at the end of the day, when you look at this project, you will have a project. For example, if you choose the less than 20%, that's less than 20%,
right.
and that I think is then we should change. Then we should change it. If it's not going to be 20%, then we should.
Right. Well, part of what's making it difficult for me to say right now whether I would say the redevelopment agency ought to pay the difference is I don't know what the difference is in
Exactly.
cost.
I don't either. I
And,
don't
and,
know if
and so, but I mean, I would be willing, as Ruth is, to go the other way to change this, because we're very late in the game here. I mean, this has been before us a number of times, and we're sort of at the end game, and I'd rather not, send staff back to say, okay, well, that deal's off the table, and now we have to negotiate a new one. I'd like to do it in the spirit of trying to work within the framework of where we are. My only question about putting this over to do that is we recess the first week in July, so we're not meeting for a month. Is there anything in terms of the timing of this approval that's going to be a big problem if this gets delayed for 30 days?
This is a condition of their building permit, right? Yeah, this is a condition of their pulling their building permit, so it may delay their starting construction. I don't know if there's anyone from here from Pulte tonight that can speak to this or not.
Is there somebody back here? Well, but I mean, okay, so I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Could I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I just want to remind us about this ordinance, because we've been administering it for a number of years now, and so there's some basic elements to it that I think are worth kind of remembering about. We're asking for 20% of the units to be price restricted, which I mentioned to you earlier is at least $200,000 a unit. There's 29 units in this project. That's almost $6 million of concession that the developer is making for you to add 29 units to your permanent affordable housing stock. It's a significant concession. When you go and look at other inclusionary ordinances of other cities, very few are at the 20% range.
Right.
They're at the 10% range and the 15% range. And so what I've been trying to do throughout these negotiations is I'm trying to make it work on a project-by-project basis, and I think it's worth making some concessions in order for you to be able to get these 20% units. You're building up now an incredible stock of affordable housing as a result of this ordinance. So I think you've accomplished a lot, and I think you'll continue to, but there are limits as to how far we can push each project before we just make it uneconomic to proceed. So I'll go back and do
I agree
more,
with everything
but
that Pat said. I just think the concentration is not a good thing.
All right.
Mayor Atkin, I
Well,
have
I'm
a
not- I'm-
substitute motion.
Okay, I'm confused about which motions are on the floor at this point, so you.
Right now, I believe we have a motion by Ms. Davis and seconded by Councilmember Cassis to approve the resolution. So
No.
a substitute motion should be done. That was right at the beginning.
Oh,
I made a motion.
I beg your
I
pardon.
didn't get a second.
I beg your pardon.
Right.
And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my second from that
All right.
motion.
Mayor Atkin, if I could say something. We have empowered Patrick to enter into these negotiations, and certainly he has demonstrated over the years that he's acted in very good faith, and we have indeed built up our stock of affordable housing. It is unfortunate that we come down after we've been party to these negotiations all along, and we've seen what's been happening, to come at the last minute and start tinkering. Now, I think we have a very good deal here. I would be very reluctant to see this council at this stage of the game say, no, we weren't involved in the negotiations here. We authorized someone to do it, but now we're pulling back and saying we don't like the deal and we're not going to move forward with it and delay the start of construction. We're in June now. We delay the start of construction another month. That throws it more into the winter months. We're not looking at a larger picture. What we're getting here is affordable units. And I think we've negotiated in good faith, and we've gotten a good deal, and I would hope you would second my motion, Dick.
Hey, can I say something? I don't want to beat this to death. I just would ask Patrick if, from this point forward, would we consider making the, either adhering to the policy we have or just giving you the discretion to do what you think should be done or give it to the housing committee? I'm just trying to come to some resolution on how we're going to go forward, because John Fricke's raised some points here. Maybe it's not appropriate to stop this project, but it is out of conformance with what we're supposed to be doing.
No,
So
it's appropriate for the following reason. We have this before us to evaluate. Why is it before us? It's before us to look at. I looked at it, I read it, and it's not acceptable. And so if we are to say, well, this one is acceptable, but the next will not be, that is not what we're here for. We're here, if the timing is bad, that is not our fault. And so it's before us to approve or not to approve. I find fault with it. And so I brought that to the attention of my colleagues.
Is there a motion?
My motion is that
Well, there's a substitute
You
motion.
have a
and-
substitute
What's the
motion.
sub-
I'm looking for a second.
What's the substitute motion?
The substitute motion is to approve the resolution, move forward with the project, and see that we get an additional 29 affordable housing units for people to enjoy and live in.
Is there a second?
Okay, could I ask, could we hear?
Dies for lack of a
Could we
second.
hear from Pulte? I mean, there is somebody here, you know, that was going to speak if, I mean, it
Yeah, sure, come on up.
might be helpful.
Good evening, council members. I'm Kevin Ma, project manager with Pulte.
Kevin, you can raise that up so you don't
Yeah,
have to.
you have to talk right into it.
Okay. You know, we respect the council's ideas that have been posed about the evenly distributed units. You know, I think the Councilman Cassis brought up a good point about trying to, you know, if we want to put the deal back on the table of looking into, well, one, if there's a way to not hold up our construction process, and then try to find a medium in terms of the settlement of the of relooking at the units. I think that would be kind of our position at this point if tonight's motion was not passed.
So I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying. You'd be willing to take another look, and this isn't going to knock the project on its ear because of a 30-month or 30-day delay?
Well, I think the key is if we can find a way to keep our permitting and construction on pace while, you know, if it had to be put back on the table, I think that would be one of our primary goals.
Well, then let me ask staff, what's the status on that? Is there a way to go forward while these details get worked out?
I think, council member, if I may, I think it's occasionally in terms of what's in the conditions of approval. So this is a requirement in their conditions of approval that this agreement be in place before they get their building permit. Pulte has worked very diligently to get their permit, and it's ready to be pulled. And what we could do is, with the council's permission, just tie that condition, and we can do an addendum to an improvement agreement we already have with Pulte, that this is tied to getting a certificate of occupancy. So we'll come back with you much sooner than that, but saying that they won't get their certificate of occupancy until the affordability agreement is in place, and that would allow them to commence construction if you want this to go back.
Because what they're going to construct is going to be the same. It's just a question of, you know, which units are below market rate and which ones aren't, so.
That's a very good suggestion, Carol. Thank you.
I would just note that there is another condition of approval related to the affordability agreement that is tied to the certificate of occupancy, which is that basically the housing department staff needs to go out and inspect those units and make sure that they've been built according to the approved affordability agreement. So we'd be having the approval of the affordability agreement and the inspection of the units for conformance with that agreement, both tied to the same thing. So we'd have to make sure they happened in
As
a
long-
timely way.
As long as a Pulte rep is here, I have to take a little liberty here. I don't usually go off, but, you know, there was another project in town that suffered major construction defects, and then we found out that the BMR units in that project were finished differently than the market rate units. Are you contemplating any kind of disparate treatment between how those BMR units get constructed and finished versus the other units?
No, we have not made any type of kind of discretionary choices in the construction types with these type of units. I mean, everything, you know, internally within Pulte, you know, most of the team doesn't even know which ones are market rate and which ones are below market. It's just, you know, everything is built to one high level of specifications.
Yeah, I mean, an example of the project that the mayor's talking about is the ceiling was just left raw in some below market rate units, and that wasn't the case in the ones that, that were
They had a
at market
finished
rate.
ceiling.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear. I mean, from the Pulte standpoint, we view our market rate homeowners and our below market rate homeowners as one and the same. There's no difference in the two. And kind of our mission is to have this homeowner for life philosophy, no matter, what they paid for that unit.
I think
Mayor
they've
Atkin,
demonstrated
I
good
have a
history.
question for the city attorney. How can we move this forward, move the construction forward, and make the changes that are sought by Councilmember Fricke, and I assume the rest of the council?
I think in terms of the council, if in the making the motion that you're willing to tie this kind of the drop dead date to the certificate of occupancy, staff will just memorialize that in an agreement with Pulte. I would certainly, though, I don't think anybody's interested in this negotiation taking that long, because you're probably not looking at a C of O until 18 months. So there should be some direction from council. You'd like to see it much sooner than
Right,
that.
could you phrase that motion for me? I'd like to change my motion.
So the motion would be that this goes back to staff for further negotiations with Pulte, consistent with the direction given by the city council, and that Pulte will be allowed to pull their building permit if all other conditions precedent to that have been pulled, and that they are required to have an affordability agreement in place before the certificate of occupancy.
That's my motion.
And I'll second that.
Substitute motion.
I-
Thank
you
you,
know,
Dick.
Okay, please
it
call the
makes-
roll. I'm going to call the question here.
This is something I brought to the attention of the city council, and Councilmember Davis, it's your motion. I mean, this should probably be my motion, no?
Well, I'll withdraw my second, so you can make the second.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay,
I'd also like to ask that in the future, when these projects come to us, can we have a listing by floors of the number of below market rate units that are on each floor, so that we don't have to go through and pick them out, just a summary?
That's really more for staff.
Yeah,
can,
second to
can
that
we do
motion.
this by acclamation, or do you want a roll call vote?
Doesn't matter.
Roll call, please.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bukowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Fricke.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cassis.
Aye.
Mayor Atkin.
Aye.
Mayor, and could we just, before you leave the podium here, and it's not what we just got through talking about, you're aware from your last project, and we're aware from that project and many others in town, that we are just having these continuing problems with leaks in these new developments that are being constructed. And I know you've got a team of people to jump in and get them fixed, and not everybody has that, and that's a good thing. But what are you doing on your end to limit these problems? Because we've got a whole bunch of new folks in town that are occupying these new units they're pretty unhappy campers for a good reason.
And some of them can't occupy their units.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the concerns of the council. From an internal perspective, this Pulte, every development that we do, we get better at the way that we build out these units. And in addition to making improvements internally, we have gone out to third-party consultants, that we privately fund and hire, that go in and do a very thorough inspection of not only during the design development stage, but also during the construction stage, to make sure that we are installing the most waterproof type of assemblies that we can. So, we feel the same concerns that the council does with some of these water intrusion issues. And we're trying, we're basically taking as many steps as we can internally and externally to provide a better finished product to the homeowners.
Well, I know nothing.
It seems to me the issue of building watertight buildings it's not rocket science. I mean, there's lots
Right.
of buildings from the 1600s still standing on the East Coast that don't leak. I mean, why is this a different day and age?
I appreciate that concern. It's when you actually step back and look at the overall picture, there's so many parts and pieces that go into this house. I mean, we kind of consider a unit, it's kind of a dynamic living object. It's always shrinking, expanding, moving, but on very small scales. So it is a very difficult process, I think, when you step back and look at all the different dynamic pieces that go into this building. And kind of our mission is to get better at controlling and installing less variability and higher reliability into the assemblies.
So what you're really saying is that you have better quality inspection. You do like a double, triple inspection.
Exactly.
And that prevents the problem. So If we had greater inspection in other areas, then we would be able to eliminate the problem as well.
Yeah, that's one of the components, yes.
Well, you said we who?
We, the city of Emeryville.
Well, Ken, you say that, we inspect according to the Uniform Building Code, and I think our inspections are totally what they ought to be. We're
Okay.
not the problem.
I'm going to cut this off
Okay.
because this is not germane.
Right. Let me just quickly ask one other thing.
Sure.
Knowing nothing about construction, but just what we seem to hear over and over again, two of the most major problems, and maybe you know this better than I do because you do this every day, seems to be with the flashings and seems to be with the people they turn loose with the nail guns and penetrating areas that then end up leading to leaks. So whatever you can do to plug in more looks and more inspections at those stages, so when that's happening, it seems to me it would do us all better. I mean, obviously, you don't want to have to come back and fix things
Right.
either.
Okay.
So, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
Point
you.
taken, thank you.
This takes us to administrative items.